Good morning on this Sunday, July 14th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Amidst all the pressure to drop out of the race, President Joe Biden faces the media. Also, the state election board meets to discuss controversial rule changes for certifying results. And Fulton County commissioners look to repair rather than replace the Fulton County jail. Melita, Phil, and Theron are here, and we welcome to the panel Melvin Everson. It's nice to see you. Many of you may remember him as a former Republican state rep. It's great to have you on the panel.
Great to be here.
All right, the debate and the lively discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
President Joe Biden faced the media amidst calls for him to drop out of the race. Here in Georgia, his supporters are urging Democrats to stop the infighting.
We are urging citizens of Georgia who love this country to support Joe Biden.
Members of Georgia's faith community blasted Democratic Party leaders and members of the press who want President Biden to pull out of the presidential race.
We pledge to you today that we're going to organize our people, we're going to strategize with our people, we're going to mobilize our people, and we're going to set records again in turnout.
First Lady Jill Biden was in Georgia this week to continue to make her case for her husband to stay in the race.
Joe has made it clear that he's all in.
The president wrote a letter to congressional Democrats insisting he's not backing down.
Democracy is on the line.
Theron, to you first this week. After the news conference where there were a few missteps, after hearing from folks including George Clooney and Nancy Pelosi, President Biden is adamant that he's not dropping out. But does he have to? As long as the money is coming in, he can stay in.
Well, let's start with the money. After the debate 2 weeks ago now, roughly, he's raised almost $40 million. And these are 1 million new donors and small donors. But what the president did this week, Lori, is that he reassured the American people that he is a president that is going to continue to lead this country. And what he started off by saying in his remarks is how he had this successful NATO summit with these world leaders, right, in D.C. And you've seen world leaders come out and compliment the president on his leadership with that. Now, did he have a gaffe? Absolutely. But we all have gaffes on this show. I call my son's the wrong name all the time. I definitely refer to my mom and other people in my family by a different name. My mom calls me my brother all the time. That doesn't mean that she's unfit or people are unfit. It just means that he's old, and he's admitted that he's old. But what I want to talk about is that the president look more like 2020 Joe Biden. And matter of fact, he bored a lot of the people in the audience with going so deep into foreign policy. And so if he did anything, he showed the American people that he can lead the world leaders at NATO, and he also showed the American people that he's going to protect the homeland, which is two military guys to my left and my right. Know that that's the #1 priority of this president. And then lastly, Lori, look, it would be not democratic, and I stole that from Keisha Lance Bottoms, right, for us not to have a open conversation about who the presidential nominee should be as a Democrat. We've had that from many presidents in the past. The difference is that it's just so close to a convention and it's so close to an election where we cannot change course now. We got to stick with Joe Biden unless he decides otherwise. But until he tells us that he's not running, I think you're going to see polls start to tighten. There's an NPR poll out to this week that shows that actually that Joe Biden is leading in this race. When you ask voters, it's 50% to 48%. And so the polls are going to tighten. He's going to actually gain more momentum, and there's still a lot of time left in this election.
Phil, isn't it best for Republicans, from what I've heard, isn't it best that Joe Biden stays in the race?
Well, yeah, as a Republican, he's going to be beatable. In fact, you like to watch polls, Theron, like I do, but let's look at, we all agree that the key swing states are going to decide the election. Georgia is definitely now in the Republican column with all the polls, but all the swing states, if you look at real clear politics, they all are going for Trump. And so he's losing, and the Democrats know they're losing, and that's why there's a circular firing squad in the Democrat Party. Lori, it's not good for the country to see this. It is good for Republicans, but I do think that Trump is the better candidate, and I think that the polls are reflecting this. And, you know, let's not talk about age for a minute, but let's talk about policy. I think that the media loves to talk about the inside baseball and age. And yes, he had a horrible debate. And I'll make this last point, though. Those images of that debate with him freezing and making mistakes and lying, actually, that hasn't even really been put out there by Republicans and conservative PACs. That's going to be frozen in. 50 million people saw that he was not capable of being president. Another 100 million on social media you saw it. Wait till those ads come out. The Democrats have a real problem with Biden as their nominee.
Melita, what is it going to take, for the Democrats to come together?
The fear of Trump, and there's plenty to fear with Trump. There's this whole Project 2025 document that has enough to make your blood run cold with policy, as Phil likes to say. But there's also the character of Donald Trump. The New York Times today called him, or yesterday, I'm sorry, on Thursday in an editorial, called him unfit to lead. They said he's shown a character unworthy of the responsibilities of the presidency. Even in the press conference last night, President Biden talked about world leaders coming up to him and saying, you've got to win. Because it's not just Democrats who fear a second Trump presidency. It's many world leaders. It's ordinary citizens in Europe. It's the people who see him cozying up to Putin, cozying up to China, and not wanting to see him reelected with the power of the presidency and the nuclear bomb.
Melvin, what is your take on all of this?
Well, I go back to last night. Never in my life have I seen a president have a press conference and you pull out a list of reporters' names you're going to call. I watched vigorously last night. I'm looking at Peter Doocy, who represented Fox News. Did he call them? No. This took me back to the previous interviews he did with news anchors, where they were given the questions to ask him. That did not instill confidence in the voters in America. And I watched ABC News, David Muir, when it was over with. He had Rachel Scott, and she said she was receiving texts from Democrats saying, no, this is not worthy. He didn't knock it out of the park, and it causes more concern now. The dam has been breached, and a lot of them are saying, and I agree with Aaron, it's up to him to decide whether he's going to get out. The closer they get to that convention, he's going to have to make that ultimate decision. And I'll go one step further. America has now seen what many knew in 2020 as he was going up the stairs to get on Air Force One, and they saw him fall. There's some issues there. My main concern is, what are you telling these world leaders when you're behind closed doors, when no one is there? To me, it's a national security issue as far as America's interests abroad, as far as other world leaders and what have you. And back to former President Trump, America knows what those issues are with Trump, and they've gotten behind that. And they are united behind this man to move on. And they know what he has done economically for this country. And the current administration is benefiting off of that, because when Trump was in office, economically, things were moving. I speak from first-hand knowledge on that.
Darren, let me ask you, because it is a big week for Republicans. The Republican convention starts. But what I want to know, what are you hearing? I mean, you've got a lot of inside sources. What are you hearing about the Democratic convention and what could possibly happen there?
Well, you saw this week, the state Democratic Party came out and said they polled their delegates, right? 90+% of them said, hey, we're sticking with our nominee, President Joe Biden. Now, that doesn't mean that there is some conversations that are being had amongst different groups and people that are concerned about going into convention. And what we don't want to have, Lori, but I'm afraid that it may happen, is a hostile, sort of chaotic convention. But we're Democrats. We can take it. I mean, we're used to getting in the room and talking about each other and expressing our concerns. And the problem with that is that the Republicans, like Melvin just said, they made their mind up a long time ago. They were going to back this guy who they know that's all the things he just mentioned, corrupt, a liar, all these things that he's done bad for this country. And so I think that what we got to do is not listen to the George Clooney. I know everybody thinks, the women think he's so handsome, and yes, he's raised a lot of money for Democrats, but George Clooney has not won a presidential race. Now, when I see Speaker Pelosi sort of gives a little bit of doubt on the national media, that does give me a little bit of pause. But I think the convention is going to be chaotic a little bit. We're going to have a robust conversation, but I think the Biden team is laser-like focused on making sure that this convention is Democratic, but at the same time that Joe Biden comes out as a nominee.
Phil?
Well, I have to laugh first about George Clooney because for 3 weeks he's at a fundraiser telling everybody to write checks for Joe Biden, and then all of a sudden the scales fall from his eyes. He says, this man's terrible, we can't have him, he'll lose. And so I hope they get their money back after George told them that. But anyhow.
But you also have some scoop about the Republican convention.
I do. Let's talk about the Republican convention that's coming up this week. And my friend Randy Evans, the Atlanta attorney, was the executive director of the GOP Platform Committee. And I would urge the Atlanta Journal-Constitution maybe to publish the platform in this Project 2025. That's a think tank that did all of that. It's not official Trump policy. Let's get that straight right now. The Democrats have this phony talking point. But the platform is actually weighted toward young voters. I think that's smart. I think that you're going to see a surprise during the convention. And we all know Donald Trump from his apprentice days on television. He's milking this brilliantly just to find out who the best person would be for vice president. But he said, when I interviewed him last year, he said, I want someone that's going to be taking over from day one who's qualified. Now, I think the Republican side will have that, whereas the Democrat side does not have that.
30 seconds, Willio.
Project 2025 is authored by many people with deep connections to former President Trump and several who were law clerks for conservative members of the U.S. Supreme Court.
So what?
You can't disavow it.
All right. Up next, the state election board here in Georgia is looking at changing the rules when it comes to certifying election results. We'll discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
It was a lively state election board meeting this week. Members discussed a rule change when it comes to certifying election results. Phil, to you on this, you agree with the proposed changes. Why?
Well, I think that election integrity is something both parties want to do. And so our former Georgia Gang colleague, Janelle King, is now on the board, and she helped lead the charge to get these rule changes. One of them, and there's nothing wrong with this when you open it up, uniformity in having the documentation released to the people. Transparency, we always hear Democrats talk about that. And then I think this is very important. This should be basic. Require poll workers to do the hand count of the ballots so they match with the voters who actually voted. Now, that shouldn't be that controversial. And so it passed. I want viewers to remember one thing. The law has changed. This state election board of 5 people now is the top dog in Georgia when it comes to making all election rules and making all election changes. So this is far more important now than the Secretary of State in that respect.
Theron, I'm always a little concerned when you talk about hand ballots and hand counting ballots. You want to talk about delays. You talk about Fulton County and your hand counting ballots. I mean, that's going to take a long time to certify results if that rule is instituted. A
long time. And, the sole Democrat on the committee, her name is Mrs. Gazal, basically pointed out a good point, is that you can certify elections in Georgia by not having every single document that this new sort of change will require. Now, let me be very clear. Democrats, we got to make sure that we don't message this wrong. We have been the party for a very long time, making sure that we have secure and fair and open elections in this state. So we're not going to go against this ruling and from that premise. But what we are going to say is that how are you going to make sure that it's implemented? And it does sort of seem that there are other discussions about wanting this to go back and look at previous elections, right? And I think that that's something that very concerned me. But look, it happened because this is a Republican-controlled board. Republicans had already strategized this is something we're going to put in place. What I'm worried about now is how is it going to be communicated down to these local counties to make sure that they have the resources and the skill set to make sure that they follow this new state rule.
Melvin, do we need to go back and look at 2020, 2022, even the primary and the elections in 2024?
Before I answer that question, let me share with the audience that my election to the Georgia House of Representatives in 2005 was under the auspices of having to produce one of the 7-piece identification in regards to be elected to that position. And I won my election by 27 votes.
Wow.
27 votes. My opponent, because it was in the 1% margin error, she requested a recount. Nothing changed.
Correct.
I'm for fair election. integrity. Whatever we have to do to assure the population that we are having fair elections, we should do that. And the governor and the General Assembly made a move towards that with the Senate Bill 202, I think. And this here is another step towards that, because we have to instill confidence in the American people, Democrats and Republicans, that elections are fair. As far as 2020, whatever we can find out that went wrong, we need to correct that and make sure it doesn't occur again in 2024.
Amen.
Melita, do we need rule changes to instill confidence in this election system?
I think we probably do need some rule changes, and what we don't know at the time we tape the show midday on Friday is what will happen in a board meeting for the Elections Board that was called on Thursday afternoon, early evening, for 4 p.m. at the Capitol, probably breaking state rules about notice for such meetings. So this Elections Board is divided, and the board chair could use some, he's a former Waffle House executive, and he could use some tips from his former line cooks about how to efficiently move things along.
Phil, there is some question about constitutionality of opening up the investigation into some of these former elections.
Well, in a courtroom, we all know that if new information comes out, you reopen the case. That's pretty basic. And so new information has come out to the State Elections Board, and they have an obligation to do that. And let me just say one thing. They're using the Secretary of State's attorney for the State Election Board. They need their own attorney because I think it's a blatant conflict of interest to continue using Raffensperger's attorney.
But the other thing is, while they're looking back, they have their head in the sand about the breach of the software when Cobb County elections officials turned it over to bad actors.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger announced another audit of Georgia voters to make sure that only U.S. citizens are signed up to vote. Melvin, do you think this is needed?
It's my opinion, and I appreciate the Secretary of State doing that. Only American citizens should be allowed to vote in our process, period.
Theron?
In the last audit, they did not find one single case that a non-citizen voted in Georgia. So I'm not sure why the Secretary of State feels the need to bring this up again. We should be trying to grow the rolls. We should be encouraging people to get their citizenship so they can vote in Georgia. So I don't agree with it. I think that it's a waste of time. Again, the last audit did not find one single case where a non-citizen voted in this election.
Well, that doesn't mean that it won't occur. This is just a preemptive measure, and you have to do this repeatedly to make sure only American citizens that are authorized to vote in our election. Just because it didn't happen in the past doesn't mean it won't happen in the future.
But I know you're a good steward of state taxpayers' money, right? You are, right?
Yes,
okay, so do you believe in putting all these audits out here where there's no evidence that an actual issue occurred? What I said, Melvin, make sure you understand what I said, is that we should spend more time trying to increase the citizenship rate in the state, so therefore they won't have that problem. They want to go and vote. They should be actually have a pathway to that citizenship so they can vote. And then, believe it or not, there are some non-citizens who choose not to vote, right? And so they're not illegally going to the polls and knowing that they're not a citizen to vote.
They choose not to vote?
They choose not to vote?
Come on.
I'm saying.
So they might vote.
They might vote, but here's the thing: the audit
if they're non-citizen, they might vote.
The audit that happened last time, Melvin and Phil, show me the proof. Where did they not?
Melvin's right. We have to safeguard this. And just this past week, no, wait a minute. Just this past week, all Democrats have voted against this citizenship.
This is nothing but a Republican move to instill fear in the Georgia voters. I got two men who are arguing with me right now about an audit. And they're both professionals, we both run companies. I run my company every year. If there's nothing wrong, I'm not saying you don't do the audit, but the question was, is it a waste of time or do we think we need it? And my conversation was, you didn't find anything last time, you're probably not going to find anything this time. Let's make sure that we're making it a state that's inclusive to everyone to get their citizenship so they can vote.
As far as audits, I sat on a lot of boards in Gwinnett County, and we are mandatory have to audit every year for accountability to find any error regardless.
And that's
What-
the key word, accountability.
Accountability.
We'll leave it there.
It's all about accountability.
All right, folks. Up next, Fulton County commissioners go back to the drawing board on how to fix their overcrowded jail problems.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Fulton County commissioners are looking for a $300 million upgrade to their jail rather than a $1.7 billion new facility. Theron, to you first. I mean, is this just another expensive Band-Aid, or could it mean any real solutions to this plaguing problem?
It's a unnecessary Band-Aid to a long-term problem that deserves a long-term solution. Look, I've heard it from people who have actually been in this jail recently. I've heard from lawyers, Lori and Phil and Melita and Melvin, who are getting literally trapped in elevators trying to go and talk to their clients who are serving time waiting for trial. We've all heard the stories about the infrastructure. This sheriff, who was duly elected by the people of Fulton County, won without a runoff, they put him back in office to make sure that he goes and basically do what he campaigned on. That is that he needs the Fulton County commissioner, and he sold it to the voters that we need a new jail. And it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. Now, what's going on here, Lori, you just got to call it what it is, balls and strikes, right? It's a lot of political maneuvering going on. I'm not criticizing anyone on the commission, but for the life of me, I cannot understand that we needed, here we go another audit. Right, what the conditions are, and
We know what the conditions are.
Right,
I mean,
and so that proves my point for the last segment. But I digress. So I think that look, we need a new jail. The sheriff has said that. I know as we tape, the sheriff is actually having a press conference where he responds to this. But I do think that there are some commissioners. We're going to have a new commissioner coming in with Mo Ivory. That we just got to get to a political agreement about how we move this jail conversation forward.
where is the leadership on this issue, Phil?
Well, that's a very good question. The county commission, I thought, would step up and try to look at various options that are out there. It's a complex problem. Theron, you have hit upon some good points there, but I don't see how we can get the new facility, although I would want one and we need one. I think and no commission wants to raise taxes in election years, so that's not going to work. And I don't see where we could get a public-private partnership, like remember how we saved Grady back in the day? I'd like to see that. I don't see an appetite for it, so we may be stuck with the commission trying to do a Band-Aid, as we call it. It's not the best option, but I do think the commissioners are talking about, with this $300 million new facility, we do need a separate section for, say, the really hardened criminals. That's a real problem in the jail, and I think you need a section for the employees because they're understaffed and they're under a lot of pressure.
I'm running low on time, but I did want to get to one more issue, which is Cobb County school leaders decided to nix plans to build a $50 million event center. Now, the 8,000-seat venue would have been built next to the district's main office and would have been used for graduations and other district events. Melita, lots of community opposition to this one.
Yes, and I think the community, rightfully so, wants the school board to focus on those things which improve student outcomes like test scores and grades and graduation rates. And the school board doesn't need to be in a facility rental business.
And the school board listened to the constituents. Melvin?
Exactly. And I have to say they did the right thing by postponing that. And they should be focusing on the academics, performance, and excellency of the students as far as graduation rates, preparing them for the workforce or career education, going on to a college or a technical college. So I understand their position as far as wanting to having a venue for a graduation ceremony, like in Gwinnett County. We use the Gas South Arena, all the schools, except for those that have their graduation ceremonies at the local schools, such as Brookwood. They've always had theirs on the football field there,
Right.
the facility. They have always had it.
All right, we'll leave it there. Saving time for winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Since you're our new fill-in panelist, Melvin, we'll start with you.
Okay, my winners and losers. My winners is TCSG and Commissioner Greg Doshin. They have continued to catapult the technical college system to be the backbone of the workforce. Here at Gwinnett Tech, where I am employed, we had a record enrollment at a two-year institution, 10,000 students at Gwinnett Technical College. And the parents and students have begun to realize that four-year institutions are great, but it's not designed for everybody. And there are some good paying jobs out there that provide opportunity for these individuals to be successful with technical college. And my losers, and I'm gonna have to say the mainstream media, because for 3.5 years they have been providing coverage for what we are dealing with right now as far as going towards the presidential election with current President Joe Biden.
I got 2 quick winners. Martin and South DeKalb, $25 million announced this week that are going to enhance the South Hub in DeKalb County. And also want to make Dr. Brian Johnson a winner, who is the new APS superintendent. See, Melvin, that was quick. Boom, boom.
All right, Bill.
I've got a shocker. It's a quick one. I actually, first time ever, making Senator John Ossoff a winner. Why? Why? Actually, one of Biden's judges was so warped and radical that he actually voted with the Republicans to vote this federal judgeship down. It's the first time a Democrat ever voted with the Republicans to knock out a Biden appointee. A winner.
Wow. Melita.
My winner is the Clark County judge who chided an Athens a UGA football player before her, telling him he was a public figure, and she hoped he would make better choices. There needs to be more talking to football players like that in Athens.
Make it a great week, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Well, I couldn't get